started by Victor Hugo Green, a New York City-based postal carrier. The guide helped African Americans avoid businesses that refused to serve them due to racial discrimination and segregation as they traveled. And here we have an image of Mr. Green. Now, the Green Book was published for about 30 years. So from 1936 to 1966, again, during the Jim Crow era of legal racial segregation. And it primarily listed sites within the United States, but not limited to the United States, which we'll get to. The Green Book featured a number of different types of businesses. So you had beauty parlors, you had restaurants, you had hotels, tourist homes, service stations. Not all businesses that were listed in the Green Book were African American owned, but many of them were. Many of them were women owned as well. And all of them were considered safe oasis spaces. So ultimately, places where African Americans could go to be served, that they could find safety and refuge in as they traveled. Now, I mentioned that several editions of the Green Book were not based in the United States. So there were some editions that were located in Canada, Mexico, Haiti, Guatemala, France, and Nigeria. So that really gives you a breadth of where Green Book sites were across the world. Now, I would be remiss if I did not mention Victor Hugo Green's wife, Alma D. Green. This woman was also so instrumental in developing and shaping the Green Book. I'll note that she was formally recognized as an editor of the Green Book in the late 1950s and actually took over production and editing of the Green Book in the 1960s after her husband died. And so again, in the later years of the Green Book, this woman, Alma Green, did run production. I should also mention that in the later years, she ran production with an all-female editorial team. So again, the power and the impact of Black women is not lost upon us, especially when it comes to the Green Book. Now, the Negro Motorist Green Book was sold at select service stations across the United States, as well as by civic groups. You could also request to receive the Green Book by mail, and its cost changed over time. When the Green Book started in 1936, it cost a mere 25 cents. By the time it ended publication in 1966, it was up to $1.95. Now, North Carolina had 326 sites listed in the Green Book during its years of publication. So again, 326 sites in our state were identified in the Green Book. This is where the North Carolina African American Heritage Commission and our Green Book's Oasis Spaces project comes in. In 2016, the North Carolina African American Heritage Commission received a grant from the Federal Institute of Museum and Library Services to document Green Book sites in our state. Documentation for us meant verifying locations, so kind of looking through the Green Book to find addresses and to see if Green Book sites were still standing, had they moved. We also aimed to take images of Green Book sites, whether they were standing or not, just to get a sense of what has happened to landscapes in African American communities across the state. We also worked to gather historical information about Green Book sites. So in some cases, this looked like images from families. This might have looked like oral histories in other cases, or research to see if we could pull together a fuller story of North Carolina's 326 Green Book sites. Now, this work took us 3 years. So we worked on this project from the summer of 2017 to the summer of 2020. And much of this project was led by a woman that some of you are familiar with, Lisa R. Withers. She worked with a team of interns and folks from my office to make this work happen and to make this work a reality. I'll note that the North Carolina Green Book project resulted in a few different things. One of the things that I was most excited about was a traveling exhibit about the Green Book and its impact across the state of North Carolina. That exhibit is traveling currently in spaces that can accommodate socially distanced exhibits, but for us, we're glad that we also have a digital version of the exhibit. And so today at the end of my presentation, you will see a link to a digital version of that exhibit that you can look through. In addition, we have a robust web portal that has a lot of resources for educators, resources for students and youth, video content, and other things for you to connect to the Green Book. I will also note that in this 3 years of research, we learned as much as we could, but we did not learn everything. And so especially if today, during my presentation, there are gaps or there is more information that I need to know, there will be a way for you to share it at the end of the presentation. We'll have an email address for you to email us. Ultimately, in addition to the exhibit and the other things I mentioned, we were really hoping to bring awareness of Green Book sites in North Carolina. We wanted to make people aware of what was standing and what was not standing, the families that are connected to these sites, and the work that is going on in communities across the state to preserve these sites. And I'm really excited that later in this presentation, we have a special guest that will be talking us through work that is going on to preserve and to recognize Green Book sites in Kinston, North Carolina. Now, I'll also note that the people behind the Green Book sites are really, really important. So it wasn't enough for us to just look at these buildings. We wanted to look at who owned these sites and what else did they do in the community. And so you'll see some of that as we walk through today's presentation. The last thing I'll mention before we dive in is that many Green Book sites in our state were located in or near very vibrant Black business districts in Black communities. And so while not all businesses in Black business districts were listed in the Green Book, we know that there is a very real connection that we cannot miss. So Kinston had 4 sites that were listed in the Negro Motorist Green Book during its publication. And something that is really interesting that sort of came up in our research is, believe it or not, the Green Book was not perfect, right? So it was updated yearly and it was meant to be disposable, right? You could toss it away and get a new one in the next year. But unlike today, there was no internet and there was no email. So if there were mistakes, those mistakes would exist throughout that edition through that year. It may or may not have been updated the next year. We also understand that these days, Green Books are pretty hard to find. In fact, they are incredibly rare. And if someone you know has one or has one in their collection, it is something that they should hold tight to. Again, these Green Books were meant to be thrown away so you could buy one for the next year, which is why they are hard to come by nowadays. There were these tiny little documents meant to be disposable. So as we go through the Kinston Green Book sites, we'll see kind of what comes up as it relates to the Green Book not being a perfect document. But to start, we will dive into Kinston's Bluebird Inn. Bluebird Inn was located on 302.5 South Queen Street. And the owner was listed as Mrs. Thelma Ingram. I want to pause here because we found in our research that a lot of Green Book sites were owned by women and Black women specifically, which was a really amazing phenomenon that we were not expecting. And so as we think about the Green Book, we can think about what it meant to Black business owners, but also Black women business owners. How did owning sites and properties shape women's independent lives and can help them contribute to their family lives? You can see that the Bluebird Inn was located for listed for just 1 year. You'll also note that in the Green Book, this space was listed as Bluebird, South Queen Street, under taverns in Kingston, North Carolina. So there's a couple of things we can see here. It wasn't explicitly called out as a hotel or an inn. It's listed under tavern, so perhaps it served a multitude of purposes. If we look at the ad that I have cropped here, it's a little bit hard to see, but we can see she sold people ice cold beer, cold drinks, and she said that this was the coolest spot in town. So you can imagine this was a lot more than a hotel to people. This was probably a fun gathering place, or a vibrant or hip or cool, as she said, gathering place. We'll also note that this is listed in Kingston, North Carolina. For several years in a row, the Green Book misspelled Kinston as Kingston. And so again, that's an error that was not corrected for a number of years. Today, this is the current site or approximate site of where the Bluebird Inn was located. We can see that that space no longer exists. And unfortunately, this is a trend that we see throughout our state. We'll get into the numbers a little bit further in our presentation. But again, as we can see, that site no longer exists. What we do know is that it did stand. We have record, right? As we see from the Green Book or from this newspaper ad, we knew it did exist or know that it did exist. But we also want to learn more. For example, who was Mrs. Ingram? Did she own other businesses in Kinston? Who was she kin to? And what else did that family contribute to in Kinston and beyond? These are stories and this is information that we are still hoping to learn. So for our second site, we'll talk about Dove's Auto Service. And I'm so excited that we have a member of the Dove family with us here today. That is so special and so important. So we had the address as 205 East South Street. That's what Dove's Auto Service was listed as in the Green Book. And the proprietor was listed as Milton Dove Sr. Now, we think that Dove's Auto Service opened in 1946 or 1947, but would love to talk to the Dove family to learn more about the early history or the long history of Dove's Auto Service. Dove's was listed in the Green Book for a number of years. So 5 years, that's a long time for sites in North Carolina. Normally sites were located or were listed only a couple of years. And so this tells us that Dove's was a really important service station to people who were traveling throughout the state. We also see here that Dove's Auto Service was listed in the Green Book as Dave's 205 East South Street under service stations in Kingston. So there's some more of those errors, right? It's listed under the wrong name. It's also listed in Kingston, North Carolina. But at the very least, people could understand that this is a place where they could get their vehicle service because it's clearly described as a service station. Now, Doves is one of the most special Green Book sites in our state. It's currently still operated by the Dove family. I'll also note that it is one of the only Green Book sites in the state that is still standing, and one of about 6 or 7 Green Book sites in our state that is still in operation. And so when I say that this is an incredibly special place, we don't see this story in our state. Frankly, we don't see this story in our country. And so my gratitude to Mr. Dove being with us on this chat today is immense, right? To be able to have somebody who's so deeply connected with an incredible legacy in our state, to have a business that is still family owned, still Black owned, and being run and successful, it is a special, special story for North Carolina, and again, for the country. The next site that we'll take a moment to talk about is Mark's Tourist Home and Cabins. In the Green Book, it's listed at 105 West South Street, and the owner is listed as George Marks. This is another Green Book site that had a fairly long run in the Green Book. It was listed from 1959 to 1967. And originally, in its early years, it was listed as an ad. Afterwards, this entry appears as a single line in the Green Book. And so we can guess a couple of different things. Generally, in a lot of publications, including the Green Books, ads were a little bit more expensive. So maybe the financial realities of these cabins and this tourist home changed. Perhaps, again, business shifted. Perhaps he was a well-known destination and didn't need such a prominent ad. We're not sure. But again, how this place was listed changed over time. You'll also note how Mr. Marks describes his tourist home and cabins. A home away from home, clean, attractive rooms and cabins. And so this tells us that he had a number of different offerings for travelers. And also, I think it's important to note that from the tourist home to the cabins, this creates space for people of different incomes to meet their needs if they need a stopover in Kinston. A room in the home is a little less expensive than renting out one of those cabins or multiple rooms in a cabin would be. And so this is something that would have been a great resource for families or businessmen who are traveling near and far. We'll also note that this is another place that served meals, and Mr. Marks notes that this has pleasant surroundings or is in the midst of pleasant surroundings. So really speaking to the beauty of Kinston's Black community and really the vibrancy of what was here at the time. Once again, another special place in our state. Currently, Mark's Tourist Home is one of the only Green Book sites in the state that is still standing. And so that is a snapshot of what that home looks like today. I'll also note really quickly, if we go back to the last slide, some Green Book sites had directional information. If you look at the ad here, Mr. Marks notes that the tourist home is at the corner of South Queen Street, right? So if you're a visitor, if you're not familiar with the place, if you happen to be in a neighborhood like this home is, that directional information might help you find your way as you approach the home and enter it. It's gonna help you know that you're in that right space, in that safe space, and ultimately in that oasis space. The last Green Book site that we'll talk about today is Phillips Grill. When we first started our research, Phillips Grill was not actually on our radar as a Green Book site in Kinston, and we'll get to why in just a moment. But you can see the address is listed at 415 South Cream Street, and the owner is Mr. Roosevelt Phillips. Phillips Grill was listed in the Green Book for 2 years, from 1951 and 1952. And as you can see, it was listed in the wrong city. It was listed in Raleigh. And so again, that's another one of those errors. I was thinking earlier today, my goodness, what would it have been like for a traveler to be in Raleigh looking for Phillips Grill and he couldn't find it because it was in the wrong place. Those errors did happen in the Green Book. Nevertheless, we know this space existed in Kinston, and you can see another place that sold food, soft drinks, family, or sandwiches, excuse me, a place to meet up with your friends, so another gathering space. Now, Phillips Grill is where the commission really could use some help. As we did our research, we weren't quite sure if this was a site that was or was not standing still. Over time, as you all know, streets change, numbers of buildings change, and so this was one of those places that is a little bit confusing to us to this day. A Google search does get us close to Queen Street, and if you see here, near South Queen Barbershop, I think that's what that says. Yep, South Queen Street Barbershop is listed on Google Maps as 407 South Queen. As I zoom in on this building next to it, I see that this here is 411. I see we've got 413. And so I'm wondering, is one of these spaces next door 415 South Queen Street? Is one of these spaces the former site of Phillips Grill? This is somewhere where you all can help us learn more, because if this is a Green Book site that is still standing, we need to be able to document that clearly so that we can do all that we need to do to protect it. Okay. So to recap, Kinston has 2 of 62 sites in the state of North Carolina that are still standing. If y'all remember at the top of my presentation, I said there used to be 326 sites. So to be a site that is still standing is incredible. And it's also important that we continue to preserve these sites, because some sites are at risk even to this day. When we started the North Carolina Green Book Project in 2017, there were 65 Green Book sites that were still standing. And so in 3 years, we lost 3 sites, and we need to do what we can to hold on to the remainder. With your help, we might be able to say that there are 3 of 63 Green Book sites that are still standing if we can figure out this question around Phillips Grill. As I noted when we were talking about Doves in Kinston is one of 7 Green Book sites in our state that's still standing, that is still in operation. And it's one of the only sites in our state that's owned by the family. I think it might be one of 3 Green Book sites that's still family owned. And so again, incredible site, special site, must absolutely be preserved. And so some of you might ask, what can we do to help? How can we help? We'll get into that in just a moment. Really what we are asking people to do is connect to people in your community who are doing the work around preserving Black history and preserving Black buildings, Black spaces, Black neighborhoods. And in Kinston, the organization that is leading that work, or one of the organizations that's leading that work, is the Kinston-Lenoir County African American Heritage Commission. And they're doing a great job specifically around Green Book sites in North Carolina. And so with that, I'm really grateful that we have a special guest with us today. Miss Clementine Bryant is a board member of the Kinston-Lenoir County African American Heritage Commission, and she's also a chair of the commission's Historical Marker Project. I have invited her to talk about the work that she is leading around the Green Book and marking Green Book sites in Kinston. And so with that, I'm gonna switch out of my presentation for just a moment while Ms. Bryant shares with us.
Good afternoon, everybody. And I am the chairperson. I'm a board member of the African American Heritage Commission, and I'm the chairperson of our very active marker project, which is one of our newer projects of the African American Heritage Group. I want to thank the library and the local library and Mrs. Thorpe and Shanta. This is new to me, so they've helped me a lot. And I want to recognize many of our city council, who are all helping us in this project. And for this opportunity to speak to you about our organization. Can you speak up a little bit? Okay. And our local connection to the African American Motor Green Book. Now, the way that after hearing Mrs. Thorpe express the intentions, we are not sure that we might not have to rethink some of our plans, because it seems like to me that we need to mark each site so as for preservation. Okay. Our group is made up of local members of the community. And what we're doing now is we've made plans to erect a single marker, and we're in the process of purchasing, and we have to do a private marker because we have selected a site that's going to recognize all 4 sites. So we have one marker, but we're gonna honor all 4 sites and their families on this one marker. And in the future, we probably will put a plaque at each one of the sites, the other sites. And as she said, there are 2 of them that are still standing. And I have just learned this week, it's like Mrs. Thorpe said, that there might be 30. Because one of the places that you were showing in the video, Ms. Thorpe, might be the one that was Phillips Grill. And even though it says that there was a gentleman that owned it, I think that it was a lady that really ran that, was operator of that site most of the time. And I think I knew her. And I have spoken to some people that we might be able to interview to get some historical information on that. Our mission is to preserve and promote African American history and historical sites and artifacts, music, and to spotlight African American contribution to the development of the arts and the history and preservation here in Kinston. Like I said, we have selected the site from the 4, and I don't need to go over and tell you. Ms. Thorpe has thoroughly explained the 4 sites that we have chosen as our first marker project. And we are very, very much into that at this time, following city guidelines and working with Ms. Thorpe and the State Department of History and Ms. Angela Wagner, administrator of the Highway Marker Program in North Carolina. We're going to follow all the criteria for historical markers and include all the components for a successful project. Our motto for our project is honor the past that has propelled the future. Our marker committee historian is, as Mrs. Thorpe mentioned, is Neuse Withers, and she's a doctoral student at, I think she's at NC State University. Mr. Goodings, he's an individual, Harvey Gooding is an individual here in Kinston that is doing a lot of research, and he knows a lot about all those places. And I have spoken to, I think, Mr. Dove on occasion about his place. I have visited there several times. And we have pretty much did a lot of research, and Ms. Withers and Mr. Goodings and the other members of our team, Miss Jessica Lyles, and the other person is who's the other person? I guess there's only 4 of us, that would be myself. But our president is Mr. Sammy Akins, and he's a city councilman. He's our president. And because of COVID-19, there's a lot of our projects that have been not going well, not, or we haven't been progressing because we're quarantined. Not quarantined, but we have to keep our social distance. So we didn't have our trip to Raleigh for the African American culture celebration this year. We didn't have our celebration of music here in Kinston. We usually have an affair every year to celebrate the birth of funk. And we have several musicians here in Kinston that were instrumental in helping Mr. James Brown reach his fame. And we usually honor these people and have a concert each year to promote that. We couldn't do that this year. Well, we're in the business of trying to raise the funds for our markers. And if you're interested in contribution, you can contact Mr. Sammy Akins. I don't have his information here today, but you can call me. My name is, she says Clementine Bryant, and my phone number, I will be leaving here that you can get at the library, but you can also be looking for in the future literature and information that we're gonna have available so that you can communicate and join us in this project. And in the future, we're going to be marking other sites in the area, not only sites, but events and individuals that have made contributions to the success, I say, or the movements here in this area. Okay. As I told you, I'm a little bit shaky and have not done this before, but I am going to be getting better next time. Our commission meets monthly on the second Tuesday at the Art Council building, but now we are doing it by Zoom. And if you're interested in a membership, you can also contact us on the information that you'll be available soon. And like I said, we're gonna have some information that we're gonna leave here at the library and different other sites in the city that you can get in touch with a member of the African American Heritage Group. We appreciate everybody that came out tonight, and we hope the next time that Ms. Thorpe is visiting with us, and if you're visiting us, that we will be more prepared with more information about our movement here in the city. But we're busy. We're very busy trying to promote and preserve the historical art and the history in Kinston, North Carolina. And I thank you very, very much for letting me say those few words tonight. Thank you. And like, if you have any questions that I can help answer, and when they have the question and answer here, I'll try to do so. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Bryant. I really appreciate you taking the time to share about what you all are doing. And I'll mention that, you know, again, there are so many different Green Book sites around the state, and some communities are doing some things, some communities aren't doing so much, and everybody's doing something different, right? And so I think what is happening in Kinston is special, but also really important. There are a few communities who are working to actually mark Green Book sites. And this is great, right? Because the state unfortunately does not have the funds to mark all of the Green Book sites in our state that are still standing. And so if we could work together to contribute to your local African American Heritage Commission so they can mark those Green Book sites that we just talked about, that could help other cities or other counties do similar work. It might also motivate the state to figure out how to support work like that in the future in other places. So again, this is important work that's taking place. It's some of the best work that we're seeing in the state. And so I ask you all to support what's happening in Kinston to help preserve your local Green Book site. I also want to be thoughtful about our guests who are on with us today. Mr. Dove, if you would like to say any words or share anything today, I would be grateful to hear from you.
Well, I was born in 1946. And that's the same year my dad opened up the garage. And he never talked about the Green Book. Only thing I learned more about the Green Book when this lady right here, she came by, asked me some questions about it. But he didn't ever say nothing about the Green Book or nothing like that. So I didn't know that much about it. I don't know what was happening about it. But I see it was real interesting to me, and I like to be a part of it, you know. But that's about all I got to say, you know.
Well, thank you. And it's not all like that's what we need, right? I just think, again, it's so special to have a family still running a Green Book site to this day. It's something that we don't see often, like I said, literally in the whole United States. So what you are doing, the business that you are running is so important to our state. And I'm thankful that you're here today. And thank you for being willing to share just a little bit of your story.
Okay, but I took this down last year because I'm 75 now, and I'm getting a little old and I ain't got nobody to take over. But I still run the record service and the inspection. That's all I do now. But I believe y'all got something going here. I like to be a part of it. Anything I can help. Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Dove.
Can I say something? Can I say something?
Sure.
I didn't know about the Green Book, but I have used Dove services.
Right, okay.
I was in a car accident and police, and I need to be told. So they connected me with Dove. So they came and got my car, took care of me. So that was my experience with
I'm glad we could handle
job.
it. I'm glad we can handle it, but.
Yeah, that was about 6 years ago.
Yeah, okay then. Where's she at? I don't see her in here no more.
Raleigh.
She's in Raleigh.
Oh, where am I? Yeah, I'm in Raleigh.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Oh,
I'm far. I mean, I wish I could be there, but they were not letting us travel right now because of the pandemic. They're not letting state employees travel, but I'm really hopeful that by maybe this spring, maybe this summer, I can start traveling again and get down there, because it would be great to get back in Kinston to talk to you all in person. That would be nice. Yeah.
Come on, see me, baby.
Now, let's see, we have a few minutes left. And so how about we open it to question, answer. I can answer any questions that you all have about Green Book in Kinston or in other places throughout the state, more about what the African American Heritage Commission does. But yeah, we have several minutes for question and answers. So please use this time.
And if anyone in Zoom, if you just unmute yourself and then ask your question, or you can type it in the chat box and I'll read it out. And if anybody here has a question, go ahead and ask. And Ms. Clementine's still here as well to answer questions about local things.
I have a question for Clementine.
Yes.
You said you all identified one place as the marker for the 3.
We have had a marker we have designed because those markers are, we wanted to make a real nice marker for our initial marker. And we had chosen we had been researching the Green Book's sites. So we chose to have one marker for all 4 sites.
And my question is, where is that location? Do you have?
Well, we have a site that's on pretty near, it's going to be on South Queen Street.
Okay.
It's a real nice site. The site's beautiful. And it's, we're working with the city and the Department of Transportation and everything, because you have to clear all those things before we install the marker. But we'll be, have them on board. Like I said, our president is a member of this city council, and he is helping us to, and we have a benefactor that has donated some money for us to start with this, but we still have to raise more money because we just really don't have any money, to do this project with, that we can use for history. I mean, this is history. And we are going to be having fundraisers in the near future. So we intend to have this marker up by summer. We want to have it up by summer, but we have working with vendors. We have the message, and we have everything designed, the shapes and everything. So we're basically, hit the ball running, and we're just, very interested in this particular project. We also have a project that's called Speak Up, We're Listening. Because if you are, when my parents were trying to tell me about things that happened in the past, I wasn't listening. Now there's so many things that I wish that I had stopped and listened to, and there's a lot of older people that have a lot to tell, but nobody sits and listens to them. So we're in the process of working with the state to archive some of those interviews or history interview, but at this moment in time, we're in the pandemic, we are not able to do a lot of oral history interviews. So we're going to be upscaling that project, and then we have some other projects that include a donation that we have of African artifacts. It's tremendous. We don't have a museum to put them in, so we have them in storage, but we're going to be doing some exhibits of those things in the future. And we just hope that we'll have, that the pandemic will be over soon, and that we can go on with what we're trying to do. We're saying that, if you don't know where you come from, you really can't plan successfully where you're going. So what we want to do through what we do here in the city is to inspire the younger generation to get to work in your community, to remember the past and maybe help us propel them into the future, to a better future. So we'll be working with you after this project. We have other projects that and taking suggestions and community input. We're going to try to have a successful unveiling soon of this first project.
Go ahead, ask your question.
I have not seen the movie The Green Book, but I'm curious to know, since you know the history, how accurate it portrays that time period in our country?
Yeah, sure. I'll be frank in that I don't think it's very accurate. And it's not really an accurate title. It's less about the Green Book and more about a musician and his chauffeur. The musician is Black, the chauffeur is white. And so it's more about their relationship than it is about the actual Green Book and using the Green Book to get from place to place. So that's my perception. That's how I see it. I think if the movie had been named something different, it probably would have been appropriate.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think that when we have more publications on the research work that Ms. Withers and Mrs. Thorpe have done, will be a better view on the story of the Green Books than the movie was, and I'm not sure what, because they've done some amazing research. And it is very, very interesting. I had a lot of it, and I'm sure that in the future, they probably will be sharing it. And we'll be talking about it all the time here in Kinston from our viewpoint. So we're gonna try to educate really what's going on back in Kinston with those sites historically. And that's my take on things.
Ms. Bryant, I'm curious what connection you all have as far as the African American Music Trail and this availability of sites, because I'm thinking, not being from here, but I'm thinking if there were African Americans coming to town for that entertainment venue, they would have had to have chosen to stay, or if they're going to be here in town, they would have had to have stayed in those places. Is that accurate?
Well, I can tell you.
Okay.
Most of the entertainers that came to Kinston, they stayed at Mark's tourism,
Right.
That's where most of them stayed, like they go dances, they just do a lot of dancing in Kinston.
Right.
And all the Black entertainers, they stayed at Mark's tourism.
Okay.
I know that for a fact.
Thank you.
And the lady that run that, we say Phillips Grill, it was run by a lady named Esther Phillips. I believe that was his wife.
Did she call her Miss Two?
Yeah, two. That was her, she used to run that cafe. I remember that when I was a little boy, coming up.
Did she have a son they called Pete?
Yeah, she had a son
I
named
know
Pete.
Pete.
She had two
I know
sons.
Pete, yeah.
Okay, yeah. He was younger.
I thought that's who that family was.
Right, that's the same family, baby. Yeah, I remember all them. I was coming up.
And if you have an interview, I don't know, is Pete still alive?
Yeah, he's still alive.
If you have an interview,
I ain't seen him in a long time.
Pete Phillips.
Yeah.
That's family.
Well, we have someone that is in our marker committee that knows him and is in touch with him. Now, I knew the lady, Miss Two.
Mm.
So that was, I used to go to get my hair done on the corner across from the Mark Tourist home. And she sold, we'd go down there when we wanted to get a sandwich and come back to the beauty shop on the corner there. And, but like I said, I didn't know, I knew that it was sort of a safe haven, is what it was. Because people traveling, musicians and like he says, traveling south, they couldn't go everywhere. So these places were like safe havens. They know they could get there, go to the Dove's Garage and get their car fixed. They could go over to the cabins, the mock cabins, and spend the night and get something to eat. Because I don't think we were a sundown town, but we were, it was a community-like thing that made you feel safe. I hope I'm,
Ms. Bryant, what is a sundown town?
Mrs. Thorpe, could you explain what a sundown town was?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So a sundown town were towns, they're all over the United States. It's not just a Southern thing. There are actually a lot in the Midwest where African Americans could not be after sundown for fear of violence, retaliation, threat of murder. Horrible things could happen to Black people if they remained in sundown towns after the sun went down, or in some cases after sunset. Many of those towns had signs up to let people know as well. So again, if you needed to be out before sundown. North Carolina had some sundown towns. I don't know how many. I would have to look that up. But again, our state had a number of sundown towns, and like I said, it wasn't just a Southern thing. Let's see what else I want to say. Oh, yes, to that point, Ms. Bryant, you make a good point. 326 Green Book sites might seem like a lot, but when you think about the fact that North Carolina has 100 counties, it's actually not that many. There are some places in our state where there are absolutely no Green Book sites. And so that tells us something, right? It's really clear where it was and where it was not safe for Black people to be in this state and people of color to be in this state. Charlotte had the greatest number of Green Book sites at 55. And so that gives you a sense. So Charlotte has 55 and Kinston has 4, or New Bern has 3. Some places have 1 and many places have 0. That sends a clear message around where it was and was not safe for Black people to travel in this state, sundown town or not.
Did anybody else have any questions? Anybody in the Zoom?
Oh, this is Sammy Aiken. I have a question for Ms. Thorpe. First of all, you remind me of Amanda Gorham. You kind of figured her a little bit. I was waiting for you to do a poem or something. Why isn't it the state? This is a worthwhile project. I know the state is the funding with the virus and vaccines and stuff. The money is real low, but we need some type of advocate for us to complete some of these projects. This is a worthwhile project for the state, and like I said, it's history. We used to have one of the cultural organization president here in Kinston. He used to be the president about 3 years ago, and this is something that we would like to see if we can get some funding from it, because some of those markers depend how you want to design it, can cost you from $3,000 to $7,000 up. We want something real nice, so we're looking for this like $7,000 range. We will do a fundraiser, and we'll get the community to contribute. So.
Yeah, so I can give a little bit of background on the state question. So I don't know if I made this clear at the beginning, but the organization that I run, we are a state agency. And so as a state agency, we have done this long work of documenting and researching these over 300 sites in this state. And so that is one way that the state has contributed. I will say again, we had to get grant funding to do this work because the state's resources are stretched thin. And particularly as it relates to markers, the way the state's marker program works is that they do not mark multiples, right? And so with Green Book sites, what we run the risk of is if the state pays for a marker for one Green Book site, the rest of them do not get marked, right? And so is that the direction we want to go? I don't necessarily like that direction because it again would render other Green Book sites in the state unmarkable. You'd also have to think about what makes that one site more special than the others, right? And for me, I don't think any one is more special than the other. They're all incredible. And so part of what we're trying to work through thinking through is how can we help local groups with local marker programs like what's happening in Kinston now. We're going to do our part as the State African American Heritage Commission to make sure people know about this effort so that they can donate. But also we have another new marker program that some Green Book sites might qualify for. The African American Heritage Commission, my organization, just launched the North Carolina Civil Rights Trail. We launched that program in August, and we are inviting people to apply for markers, which we will fund. We are inviting people to recognize or apply for markers for sites that contributed to the civil rights movement in North Carolina or beyond. And some of these Green Book sites do just that. I mentioned earlier in my presentation that the people behind the sites are really important because we know some of our Green Book sites were not only, restaurants or beauty parlors, but they're places where people organized during the civil rights movement. They're places where people met during the civil rights movement. And so again, that is one way we might be able to get around the big state marker program to mark some Green Book sites if they have connections to the civil rights era. And so what I will do as I wrap up my presentation today, I'll share the website that you can go to for the state's Civil Rights Trail program, because that is an opportunity for markers. I see that we're just at about 3 minutes, so I think we have time for one more quick question, and then I'll put some of those resources up on the screen. So anybody else have one more question?
I just want to say that earlier on, I talked with Mrs. Wagner. I think her name is Miss Angela Wagner.
Ansley.
Yeah, and I was at the state level about that funding the marker, and she said that they had been brought up and that this state had too many. They had too many sites to fund one. Because if they considered one, then they would have to consider doing them all. So they had decided that they would not. And that's why we decided that we would just do the private marker. But
Yeah.
We appreciate all the help we can get.
Yeah. And the last thing I would say to that point is, if this is a project that you really want to see, a program that you would really like to see, talk to your legislators, because they're the people who hold the purse strings. I do not, but you can serve as advocates on your behalf. And if you talk to your elected officials, that is another way to really push for funds for these types of projects, because I cannot make those asks as a state employee, but you can as constituents. And so if this is something that you want to see, talk to your lawmakers.
I have one more question. Are any of these sites on the National Register?
That is a great question. I was actually having this conversation yesterday. So Magnolia House in Greensboro, North Carolina is in a National Register district. We're actually working right now with the State Historic Preservation Office to get a sense of what is and what isn't on the National Register for Green Book sites that are still standing. Not many of them are, which is something that we do want to remedy. And so with that being said, we're trying to find funding to figure out how we can get all of those 62 sites on the National Register. Mr. Aiken, I mean, it's like you were in my meeting yesterday, because we started having that conversation yesterday. So if that's something that you think you might want to be a part of, I would be happy to have you on that team. as an on-the-ground advocate for that work, because again, we have to find money to do it, but it's something that we want to do, and we would like to get all of those sites on the register.
I would be interested.
Okay, wonderful. Well, with that, what I'm going to do next is put on the screen a couple of web links as well as an email to reach me. And so let me just share my screen one more time here. Let's see. Okay, so y'all can see this. So this first, it went back to the, one second, y'all. This first link that I'm going to show, okay, so this link here, this is the website for the North Carolina Civil Rights Trail Marker Program. You can visit us online. We'll start accepting applications again for this program in March. Applications will be due in October. We have a trail coordinator who's amazing. Her name is Marquisa. And so she can work with you to make sure that you have a strong application and a site that will get marked. And so visit us online to learn more about that program and to talk to Marquisa. This next slide is some Green Book specific resources. So this is the email where you can reach us. If you'd like to get more involved in the North Carolina Green Book Project, Mr. Aiken, to work with me on this larger National Register conversation. If you have people that we need to connect to, oral histories that we need to do, this is the email address where you can reach us. My whole team has access to it. We're a staff of 3. So one of the 3 of us will get this email. I also mentioned at the beginning of the presentation that we do have a website dedicated to the North Carolina Green Book Project that we're adding to. But on that website, you can find that digital exhibit. You can find the schedule for the traveling exhibit, as well as some more resources. So you can see there, aahc.nc.gov/Green Book Project. I will also note that we are seeking more money to move this work forward. It would be great to have a statewide marker program. We would love to do more with our website. We would love to do more oral histories, more things for educators, but all of those things cost money. And so currently we're in a place where we are seeking more funds to move the North Carolina Green Book Project forward. And so again, your advocacy can help us to do that. I want to thank everyone so much for your time today, for your presence. Mrs. Bryant, thank you so much for joining me on the stage today. It's so nice to see you in person finally. Y'all, Ms. Bryant and I have had a lot of phone conversations. And this is the first time we're seeing each other, so this is really nice. Thank you for your warmth and for welcoming me from Raleigh. This was a really nice conversation, and I look forward to staying connected with y'all.
We'll see you at the unveiling.